Bandwidth for changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com, and we're hosted on Linode servers. Head to linode.com/changelog.
This is Dmitri Shuralyov, and this is Go Time!
It's Go Time, a weekly podcast where we discuss interesting topics around the Go programming language, the community, and everything in between. If you currently write Go or aspire to, this is the show for you. Welcome back, everybody. I know it's been a couple of weeks between storms and everything. First, Houston, where our studio is, and then here in Tampa, where Brian and I are, and studio getting moved. But we're getting back on track, and we've got a fun show planned today. Today's show, or episode number, is 58. And on the show today is myself, Eric St. Martin, Brian Kettleson.
Hello.
And Carlicia Pinto.
No storms in California.
Right. Maybe I should reconsider that West Coast move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And our special guest for today is Dmitri Shuralyov. I knew I was going to butcher that. Dmitri Shuralyov. Why am I... See, when I'm trying to say it fast, now I can't say it.
Yeah, you had it before.
I know. You try to get that excitement up and say it fast. Yeah. So Dmitri Shuralyov.
Yep. Hello, everyone.
Better known by his Twitter handle, Shurcool.
Yep, I'm Shurcool on GitHub and Twitter and basically everywhere. It's great to be finally here.
Yeah, so for anybody who may not be familiar with you and the work that you do you just kind of want to give like a brief rundown about who you are, what you do, kind of like your history in the Go community?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, as you said, most people probably know me by Shurcool. That's what I use as my username everywhere. I'm a software engineer. I use Go since 2013 or so. So it's been 4 years now. And it's no secret, I'm a big fan of Go. I really enjoy using it. So these days, I kind of do something slightly unusual. I work full-time on open source Go code. And maybe it would make sense for me to kind of go a little bit into my background, how I started. That would kind of explain how I got here.
Yes.
Please do.
All right. Well, so I got into programming pretty early on, I think around 13 or 14. It's basically as soon as I discovered that you could actually make video games, not just play them. You could do that by writing code. That got me really hooked. And I kind of quickly became very interested. I started to learn more about it and quickly progressed from like Visual Basic to others and ended up with C++. So that was kind of my language of choice for a long period of time because when you're doing video game development, that's one of the better tools. So, and I wanted to make video games for a long time, pretty much up until I got to my master's. I was doing my final project there, and this was a huge project in C++, and I was working on it for many months, and there was a lot of pressure, there were a lot of deadlines, and I had to do a lot of things very quickly, and I felt a lot of frustration at that time because there were so many things that I had to do kind of manually and in a very tedious manner. So I was using Visual Studio, and for C++, it didn't have great refactoring tools, and I was just like doing all these things. Like if I wanted to rename a variable or a function, I would have to change it in the CPP file and then the header file as well. If I were to move something, it would be a lot of like manual steps. And that kind of frustration just made me really want to work on the tools that would make my job easier or the jobs of all the programmers out there. So that got me interested more on the developing tools side. So sometime after that, I felt so motivated to do that. And I had all these ideas. I wanted to try them out. So I started working on this experimental project called Conception. And I really wanted to try some crazy ideas. Like, I was thinking, why is it that source code is text files? Like that is so backwards. It should be something more sophisticated. So I tried to put those ideas to the test. And for about a year after that, I worked exclusively on this project. And it was a lot of fun. It was very interesting. And I tried a lot of experimental ideas. And at the end of that year, I actually submitted it to a conference. Well, it was a competition, live 2013, and I ended up winning first prize. So that was pretty cool. So what kind of happened after that is that this project got a lot of visibility and publicity, and it kind of helped me get my first job in San Francisco, which was a place that I really wanted to end up or go to work sometime. So I'm from Toronto right now, and yeah, San Francisco, it's always been a dream to go and work there because I knew it's the one of the best places for technology. It's where all the startups are, all the big companies, and lots of things are happening there. So it's kind of like just a dream to go there. So I ended up getting a job, and so I ended up working first at Trigit. It was a startup where we did some real-time advertising and real-time bidding and advertising, things like that. And so this was a company that was just getting into using Go. So one of the reasons they hired me is because I was good with C++ and Go. So I thought that this is a great place for me to kind of practice both languages and help them kind of convert a lot of things they were doing from many languages to they had a lot of success with Go, so they started to push it to more and more projects. So after that, I worked at another company, SourceGraph. So that one, you may have heard of it. It's we're building tools for developers, and it's kind of famous in the Go community because of doing the live streaming or GopherCon and so on. So this was a very different environment where there's a lot more open source. I was actually working on developer tools, so this was a lot of fun. But in the course of working in San Francisco for those 3 years, I was kind of always saving up towards this future dream of being able to just work on open source full time. So that was my kind of dream of what I wanted to try next. Because it's one thing when you have your weekends, maybe an hour or two on weekdays to contribute to open source, and a whole different story if you actually have your full time available to do it. And because I became such a big fan of working with Go, I wanted to basically do more of that. So this actually happened, and I ended up starting this beginning of this year, end of last year. And I kind of transitioned, I left my job there and came back to Toronto and started doing this thing of kind of working full time on open source Go code.
That is fantastic.
That's really awesome.
I was going to ask you if you were being self-funded or funded by a company, but it sounds like you're being self-funded, right?
I am self-funded, yeah. So it's basically my savings that I was working on, saving towards this Go, and that's kind of what's funding this year. And of course, as I earn some money and then add to that, I can continue to do this a bit more. But right now, I don't have a concrete idea about next year. We'll see how that goes. But this year, it's definitely, yeah.
And you have a ton of experience, so I am assuming the break that you're taking to work on the open source projects that you want to work on is not so you can acquire more skills. So I'm wondering what your end game is. Are you trying to just take a mental break and work on the projects you want and maybe finish some or take them to a higher level? Are you don't have an end game, or are you preparing yourself for your next step? What is it?
Absolutely, yeah. So I definitely have an end game, and it's more of a sort of intermediate, one step at a time kind of plan rather than a complete vision for where I want to be. But essentially, I can say that I'm just building and working on the things that I really want to exist that don't really exist yet. So I'm just kind of filling my own desires of some tooling or some things in the Go ecosystem that I think would be awesome to have, but they don't necessarily exist or they're not finished. So I just basically work on making the things that I want to see happen. That is the main motivation. And of course, I want to maintain my skills and always learn new things, get better. But it is mostly about just making things that I want to see happen.
Awesome.
That is really cool. I think we need to go back and talk about conception for a little bit, because that stuff was out there, way out there. Tell us, since this is a podcast and we can't see it, tell us what conception was and what you were trying to accomplish.
Absolutely. So the original project was actually started in C++, and back then I was really into IDEs, and I wanted them to become a little bit more visual, and also I wanted them to kind of help you more with the refactoring. So again, when I started, C++ was the language that I had in mind as what I wanted to use, and I just saw that there are all these opportunities to make it easier to develop in C++. But essentially what happened is that as I started to work on the project, I kind of discovered Go. Like that's like somewhere at the beginning of that, in the middle of the first year of working on that project, I saw that, hey, there's this cool language called Go. Let me try it for the problem that I was solving at the time was I needed to start some, binaries, basically shell out, and run some commands. And in C++, this was at the time really difficult. Like it was probably 80 lines of non-portable, really hacky and error-prone code. Like that kind of worked, but you just knew that this is not right. It would probably fail, like if if something happened, and it was so long that it was really hard to read the code. So when I tried Go, I found the OS exec package, and I was just really, really impressed with what I saw there. So then I started to use Go for more things, and very quickly, conception ended up being supposed to be at least an IDE for working on Go code. So it stepped away from C++. But the way to describe it, and it's definitely best to see, there's a 5-minute video that I made that describes like basically everything I've done in those 1.5 years in 5 minutes. So think of it as a 2D canvas, like a really large, maybe infinitely sized canvas that you have a viewport into. And on this canvas, you had what I called widgets at the time. And the widgets could be basically anything, but most of it would be things like maybe a file, a Go file, for example. Another widget could be a Go run widget, which would take a file widget and run it, and I present the output. But then you can also connect other widgets on top of that. So like you'd have a diff widget. So you could connect that to the output of a program and then maybe diff it against the output that you wanted to produce. So the idea was that everything was alive. And as you'd make a change or change the code or change a connection between the widgets, it would update everything automatically. Like there would be no having to press buttons to make that happen. So as a result, you kind of create things and just keep working. And then whenever you had a question about the problem you were working on and you wanted to get some visibility into it, hopefully there was a widget that could help you get that answer. Or if not, you could create it. Well, at least I was creating them at the time. And that's kind of how it went. And given that it was an experimental project, one of the biggest benefits for me or the learnings that I've done was to gain understanding for why things are done the way they are in so many ways, and why seemingly bad or outdated practices like using text files that you'd think, well, this was done in the 70s, like it's got to be because computers back then weren't so powerful. Well, not really. There's many ways that existing systems are really, really good, and people tend to like not really appreciate it, not really understand it. But when you try to create a system to beat what exists, that is a great way of like finding why it works so well. So a lot of it was learning about the strengths of some of the ways that we use compilers and code editors and so on in ways that they're actually really good. So armed with that knowledge, I can then do like the next things that I could do would be obviously better.
It was absolutely mind-blowing for me when I first saw the demos. So congratulations on thinking outside the box and working through different concepts and ideas for code editing, because it really was just amazing to see that the first time.
Oh yeah, well, thanks a lot. I appreciate it, and that's kind of what I was hoping to do, is just try to create something that would be really cool and that would make a lot of sense when you see it. But it's not easy, but the things that do work well, it's always great to see it. So if I can inspire people, that's an awesome thing as well.
The good news is I think of two things when I think of your name. The first is conception and how awesome that is. And the second is, isn't that the guy that put packages in gists in GitHub? So
I knew that was going to come up. So, I can't ever escape that.
No, you can't.
But yes. Yeah, I'd like to cover that. So just up front, I will say that I have deleted the very last gist, I believe in 2015.
That's
So
awesome.
from that point forward, the only gists that still exist are, people's old code. Maybe they've copied it or forked it or rendered it or whatever, and so on. Like none of my code has gists anymore. But yes, I did that. And again, that was an experiment that I ran. So when I was doing it, I was kind of well aware of the downsides of it. Well, maybe more so after some time, but it was a thing that I wanted to try because there were also advantages to putting some code in gists. Because imagine you want to have a function shared between two projects, and you want to do this like in maybe a minute and a half. Like you don't have time to go through the whole process of creating a new Go package and making it really nice. Like you just want to do this really, really quickly. So a gist was perfect for that. And what actually made it work is that I had a widget in conception that I could just press a button, and whatever I pasted into a box would automatically become a gist. It would put it into my Go path. Like it would do everything in one button press. So that is the reason why it was kind of efficient to create a lot of code for sharing between projects at the time. But over time, I saw that it's great for the initial prototyping. It is not good for maintenance. It's bad that the gists have like numbers as the package name. So it is not a good practice. And over time, I refactored all the code that I needed to have like really idiomatic, nice package names, and it'd be the kind of code that people should say, yeah, this is something I could actually import in my project. So yes, they did exist then. They no longer do exist, and if you see them, please delete them.
I think you should wear it with pride. Why not?
I do, yeah.
Why not?
I want us now to take a moment and discuss if it's gist or gist. No, I don't. I'm kidding.
Then we
GIF
have to start
or
talking
GIF.
about GIF
Yep,
or GIF.
yep. It's the same
Yeah.
question.
It's
can't
no.
do it.
But I say GIF and gist, so
Oh,
it cannot be the same.
Yeah, I do too. That's
yeah, I think
Right?
that makes sense.
See, let's not go there.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
I do want to talk about though, because to me it seems like such a big deal what you're doing, taking time off and to work on your preferred open source projects, the ones that you really want to make sure happen. And I want to. And there's so many projects you're involved with, but I do want you to talk to us about your top 3, starting from the most important, the ones that you really want to make happen, and why, and where are you at with that project, and are you getting help? How
Sure.
is it far from being completed? What does completed mean? So tell us.
Sure. So I don't think I have like a very kind of nice disconnect between the different projects. A lot of them are interconnected in some ways, and a lot of them are kind of these umbrella projects where there's maybe something higher level and lower level. But let me say that right now, I think we're in a very, very interesting point in time. So the language Go came out relatively recently. Like it has been almost like 10 years now. 10 years, yeah. But it is relatively new, and just maybe a few years back, on the back end, we had a whole different set of languages that people could choose from. But on the front end, it's always been that JavaScript was kind of the only officially supported language, because that's the only language that browsers support. And that has started to change recently. And one of the ways that it has started to change the most, in my opinion, is there was ASM.js, that technology first, but what is happening now is WebAssembly. So in my opinion, this is a really awesome and kind of important point in time, because it means that hopefully soon more and more people can start to see that there's now the choice of what language you use inside the browser, what kind of technologies you use to develop your front end stuff. And I really want to see Go play a more important role here, because in my opinion, Go is just a really great language. And I mean that in a general way. Like I don't think it's great for making web servers, even though it is, but it's great for many things. So I find that it's great even for doing front end stuff. And I've been testing that theory for the last 2 years, I think. And I'm still very, very happy with it. So I'm continuing to push that in that direction. But because of that, I think WebAssembly and Go are important. So that is kind of what I'm thinking about. And that's like one of my top priorities. I want to make that as much of a reality as possible over the next few years.
Now, is there anything currently that's compiling or transpiling to WebAssembly from Go? Does Go4JS do that?
So the situation right now is that if you want to write your front end code in Go, you have a really good option, and that is Go4JS. But Go4JS goes directly from Go code to JavaScript. It has nothing to do with WebAssembly. And the thing about WebAssembly is that it's a very, very efficient, wall-level kind of bytecode virtual machine, stack machine kind of language. So the idea is that you really want to target that with a powerful compiler. So things like CLang, GCC, like those kind of compilers, they have a great opportunity to produce WebAssembly code. You don't want to do it completely from scratch by hand and so on. So what makes Go4JS do what it does is that it's basically completely it revolves around Go and JavaScript. So if you were to try to add WebAssembly support to Go4JS, you're basically starting from scratch. There's nothing really in it that helps you accomplish that job. So the way that I think this will happen is that, hopefully maybe the official Go compiler will sometime in the future be able to target it. Or maybe somebody will work on a separate project. But yeah, Go4JS is not going to help in this sense because it's basically targeting JavaScript, and there's no point in trying to make it target something else.
So, like, basically everything you work on is kind of like these bleeding edge kind of thoughts and concepts, because you've also been working on GraphQL stuff for a long time too.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's
So GraphQL, it's something that I've somewhat dabbled in recently, and I'm mostly done with that effort. But what I saw, this happen about 4 months ago, 3 months ago. At that time, GitHub announced that their next version of the API, version 4, it's going to use GraphQL. So this is the technology that, like, for anyone who hasn't heard of it yet, it's a technology from Facebook. They've kind of made it for their own APIs because REST wasn't really cutting it, and they wanted to kind of push the envelope. So it's a way of building your, website's APIs and then kind of being able to make these really efficient queries that just give you the exact data you want and nothing else. So when GitHub announced that their next API is using this, that's when I saw that, like, this is actually technology that's now picking up steam, and it's kind of more useful to have support for it. And I saw that in Go, there were a couple packages that added that implemented the GraphQL server side, so you could have your GraphQL server written in Go, but there was absolutely nothing for the client. And that's when I saw that there was this opportunity to work on a client. And I've done a little bit of research, and I tried a few things, and I saw that, okay, if I spend maybe a couple of weeks, I could have a working client that is, like, I saw that there's quite a bit of work, but I saw that I could do this in that amount of time, and I thought it was worth it, like, to make it so that there be a Go client for GraphQL that people can use. And that's sort of where things are right now. I've created it. It has some to-dos, but it's mostly done, and the to-dos that can be completed over time. So, like, the basic functionality works, and anyone can use it.
That is pretty cool. GraphQL is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's one of those technologies that always seemed really, really fascinating, and I was always looking for the nail for that hammer, like,
Yeah.
it was, yeah.
So I was somewhat fortunate in that very recently, like maybe just 2 weeks ago, I actually had the chance to use it for real in a project. So up until that point, I've only been testing it. Like, I've written programs that would just do various things for testing purposes, never really using it to, like, serve any kind of concrete needs. But then when I had a chance to actually use it, I was really nice. Like, it was a pleasant experience. One of the kind of things about it, one of the properties of GraphQL is that it's very type safe. And I really enjoy that property of Go, and this was really, really nice to see it here as well. So you have, like, really great, strong type safety, and it makes things like autocomplete help you a lot more. And the code that you write, you can kind of see that, like, this handles all the cases. There's nothing unhandled here. Yeah, it was just awesome to use it. it helped me.
I know there is at least one episode on a changelog that talks about GraphQL, and I listen to it. And whenever I listen to somebody talking about it or I read about it, I want to use it immediately. But then I go back to,
Yeah,
good old rest.
so
Just
I really
because.
think that GraphQL it's a great technology. It has a lot of strengths, but it also has some weaknesses that will take time for everybody to find ways to deal with. So nobody's going to jump and switch to it like right away this year. It's going to take many years, I think, and people will gradually switch over to it. And it really makes the most sense if you're starting a new project to consider using it then. Like it's not so nice to take an existing one that's already built around RESTful APIs and try to rewrite that or start adding GraphQL. It's not going to help you as much, but it could. So it's okay if you don't jump on it right away, but because like the more you wait, the more mature it's going to be when you do use it. But it definitely has some really nice properties compared to REST.
And talking about front end stuff, because you know so much about it, about this space. If sometimes some web applications are basically they need to be a back end, the interfaces with the database, and it needs a reporting layout on top of it. Is there any Go package that would do that?
Do you mean when you say reporting? Do you mean like kind of just render some front end components that visualize like whatever data is on the back end that's being served?
Yeah, something like the equivalent of an Excel front end.
Oh, like an Excel front end. I see.
Yeah, not an Excel exactly, but you choose fields and then you get a table like output of data.
Well, I can't think of an existing project off the top of my head like that exactly. I mean, if you're really talking about like database editing, like a table editing component
Not editing,
or code.
just outputs, just
Just like
fetching data.
visualizing it. I see.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you mean like do you have some like database output that you want to visualize this way and
Yes.
you'd want to use it?
Yeah, and I might want to filter by fields.
I see. Yeah, I don't know of an existing solution. I think you would have to maybe look for it or maybe just create it yourself. But the thing that does exist right now, or it continues to be developed, it is a project called Vecti, and I think this has already come up on some previous episodes. But it's kind of the equivalent of React, but written in Go and really like specifically focusing Go, because even though there have been kind of projects or wrappers around React to make it possible to use that on the front end, there's a lot of kind of inefficiency in having to map to what they created in React, which was targeting JavaScript specifically. So Vecti tries to do things in a really Go-centered way, and you could totally use Vecti then to create this kind of some sort of front end. You would still have to build it from the individual HTML tags and so on, like to visualize all the things you want, but it will let you not worry about having to like re-render some parts of the page as the data changes. Like it takes care of that, just like React. But yeah, you would have to be the person that works on it or something like that. That's one of the disadvantages of trying to use Go on the front end, is that unless somebody else has created it, you probably have to do it yourself. And sometimes you have to like really kind of make this path that no one has traveled yet before. But that can also be a lot of fun. So it's kind of great if you're looking for that kind of challenge.
Yeah, because other languages that are more mature, they have a bunch of packages that would do things like
Yeah,
that.
actually, I saw like an example of that very recently. So there was an NPM package you could download, and it's basically like a component that visualizes diffs or like patch files. And I was like, what? You can just npm install that, and like it already exists and has all these properties. You can configure how it displays it. Like that's the kind of state that they're at. Like they have pre-made components for visualizing diffs. Yeah, it's kind of just I thought it was interesting to see that. Whereas I was building something like that myself from scratch because it didn't exist yet.
I think we've talked about Vecti a time or two, but it's definitely the one Gopher.js front end framework that I understand best. That it clicks with me the best. I like Vecti a lot.
Do you know any project that uses it, Brian?
Oh, that's a good question. Not off the top of my head, I don't. But
Well, it's easy to search on
yeah,
GitHub.
I have some.
Yeah.
I have some GitHub stars
Or source graph.
of
Source
source
graph,
graph.
there we go. Source graph is the best.
I actually use it in one of my projects. It's called Go Package Store, and it's a project for displaying updates for your Go packages in your Go path. So originally, it was this like really simple application. It would basically stream the HTML from the backend, and just the browser displayed it as the HTML was being served to it. But that had some disadvantages. Like there were some things I couldn't do. So I ended up rewriting it so that everything renders on the front end, and I used Vecti for that, and it works really well in my experience. Like it enabled me to do all that, and some things I can do before. Like there was a feature request to add an update all button. So I guess people, they don't want to click on updating every single Go package individually. They just want to press that update all button and it take care of the rest for them. So now that button exists, and Vecti made it super, super easy to implement it. But it's also a package that is kind of in development. So there's still some changes that are being done to it. And they're always looking for ways to improve things or do things better. So it's still, somewhere in its medium kind of milestones, I'd say. But it's definitely usable. Like you can start using it today and it works well as long as you're willing to update your code should something change.
One of my favorite examples of a Vecti app is the Go Play Space. Oh, it looks like somebody just posted that into our Slack too. That's at github.com/IAFAN/Go Play Space altogether. And it's like a Go playground that has lots of extra cool features, and it's really slick.
Yeah, that's a really great example of it.
So I started our timer a little late, so I think we've got time for probably a couple more things, and then we can roll into projects and news. Um, One thing I'd like to at GopherCon, this was kind of discussed, and I saw this morning too. So for everybody who doesn't know, while we're sitting here on this show, Gotham Go is currently going on, and I have FOMO. But
Lots of it, yes.
so, I saw a couple of posts, especially with regard to Steve Francia's talk about kind of like the state of Go. And there's kind of been like everybody's talking about like Go 2 and things like that. What's your take on that? Like, what would you like to see happen? What would you like to not see happen?
That's a great question, Dimitri.
Yeah. So I definitely have, a very specific way in which I enjoy using Go, and that's like one of the ways at least. And that's I appreciate it for its simplicity, and it kind of gives you the really, really well thought out basic building blocks and kind of lets you do the rest. So like that really works well with the way that I like to approach things. So I definitely like the opposite of what I want is Go to becoming basically the next JavaScript, completely changing it, adding generics, all these new features. Like I don't want to see new features. I just want to see stability and Go continue to be simple. And it can of course address things like basically the talk that Russ Cox gave about how they're planning to get to 2.0 sounds amazing to me. So he said that it's not going to be this major jump, but rather like they're going to work on everything that has to happen that is still backwards compatible. So like the next many years of releases will just be like incremental changes to make 2.0 possible, but still be 1.x, 1.11, 12, and so on.
Yeah, I really kind of like that approach. Like that it was very likely that it could be like, well, 1.20 is
Yeah.
now 2.0,
Yep. And it's not like a big dramatic change. It's like a smooth transition. So that sounds really awesome. And yeah, I think there was another talk that Brad Fitzpatrick gave about how like as Go matures, it kind of becomes asymptotically more boring. But that is a great thing, and he definitely makes a strong argument for it because like the excitement happens at a higher level. Like it's the projects you build, it's the libraries you build, it's how you use Go. That's where the excitement is. But Go itself, like it doesn't need to do more things because one of the when people think about like why not add these features, why not do this and that, you have to consider all perspectives. And one of the perspectives that's often overlooked, it's how this feature will interplay on the tooling. It's how it's going to affect the kind of things you could kind of use Go for, or how you could maybe generate code, or the kind of questions you can answer about code bases. So one of the goals of Go is to be able to create code or projects that scale really well, and that scale across complexity of the project, scale as more developers work on that code base. And these are things where you don't necessarily want all the latest and fancy features. It's the opposite. Like, you just want it to do what it does really well, and continue to scale that way. I think that works really well.
So it's actually really interesting because I just left Velocity, and Brendan Burns did a talk, and this was Kubernetes focused, but it's along the same lines. He talks about kind of like the evolution of things, right? Like, we have a problem, we invent something to solve the problem, then it takes a while for that to kind of like stabilize and mature, and for patterns to evolve from that, and then we build a layer of abstraction on top of it, right? Like, first there was machine code, then there was assembly, and then we kind of built C and C++ on top of that. And um the takeaway from his talk was really that, like, the way we're building distributed systems even with Kubernetes is like doing it in assembly language, right? But I think that the point is still kind of the same with Go right now, is like, it doesn't need to be fancy and brand new and all kinds of stuff crammed in there, because then it never matures to a point where we have consistent patterns where we can build that layer of abstraction on top. And the innovation always comes from the level of abstraction above, right? We can build significantly better systems now in languages like Go than we ever could in assembly. Um, so yeah, kind of to your point, like, we want it to stay fairly stable, and like, let's figure out the patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. There was one of my kind of favorite quotes, because I said that, like, I value simplicity. So there's one quote that I found. It's by Frederick Chopin. He was this Polish pianist from the early 1800s, and he said that simplicity is the final achievement. After one has played a vast quantity of notes and more notes, it is simplicity that emerges as the crowning reward of art. So I really resonate with that, because it's when you're working on a project, at first, when you don't quite know what it's going to be or how you're going to achieve it, you end up doing a whole bunch of things, and you try to learn about it. And then once you have it finished, that's when you start to understand it better. And then only after all that insight, you can actually maybe simplify it and come up with the final solution, which you couldn't have started with, because like that simplification, it was possible because you understood how things work. So similarly with Go, it's many things that many of the programming language features it has, they seem to be from decades ago, but that's because like it really took all those insights from the languages and the developments that have happened before it, and like applied it very carefully. So that's it's really interesting how that works. But yeah, you don't get to simplicity right away.
So I've been reading a lot of code lately that is written in languages that have generics. And I know that it's been said many times that Go was written specifically or designed specifically to be a language that's easy to read and understand. And after dealing with these languages, and I'm not going to mention any names because this isn't a language war thing, but I do really appreciate the fact that Go doesn't have generics, because it makes it truly harder to read what's going on.
Yeah, yeah.
I agree with that.
I've got another example of this was a feature request that I went into the issue tracker, and I just wanted to share a perspective on like how adding something that seemingly makes your life easier may not do that. So like the feature in question was about being able to like have build tags for test files. So you could have a test file that, or rather, so you could exclude things or include things only when you're testing or not, right? Like right now it's just underscore test. That's the only way, but the feature request was about also being able to use build tags. And like one of the ways that I really appreciate the current limitation that you cannot use build tags for anything test related is that I know like whenever I'm reading code, I know very well that if I run the real code right now, and then if I run the test, like it has to be the same thing. There's no additional code that can only happen when it's not in test code or not in test mode. So like some of these restrictions, they basically make it easier to read and understand the code and make certain guarantees about it. So it really helps. Like the readability is definitely prioritized, and that's one of the best features of Go, in my opinion, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I understand that I've worked with languages that did generics, and I understand that makes some things simpler. Not sure if there are things that can only be achieved with generics. I'm not that knowledgeable, but I am still not convinced that anything that would be simpler by using generics or easier or shorter to write would trump the readability feature of Go.
Yeah.
I think it's a
Yeah.
very personal thing, maybe.
Well, and we have to keep in mind that in programming languages and in software engineering as a whole, we always have to make compromises. Like you can't have absolutely everything. So you have to make sure that you balance what you have and what you don't have. And sometimes it means like saying no to things. Sometimes it means, not doing what you want because you understand the greater benefit. It's worth it. So, we have to like remember the positive side of saying no.
I think you can have everything. Isn't that what Scala is?
Yeah.
Gosh.
I mean, actually, C++
No.
these days, like all the latest revisions, the C++ 17 and the later ones, like it feels like it's a great example of like what happens when you have everything under the sun in it. Like, sure, you can do all those things, but, I wouldn't want to review that kind of code or like maintain it. So
You don't have everything because you don't have the readability. Come on.
And like
Go
there's
read
so
some
much.
C++. It's like you have to let's look at the header to see what this does. And
So I wanted to measure this. So this morning I ran this program. It measures lines of code, and I saw that like I have more than 100,000 lines of Go code in packages that I support daily. So like these are packages that if somebody has a bug or if it fails to build or if something breaks, I would within 24 hours like respond to that and follow up on it. Like I feel very comfortable doing that. And there's just no way I could deal with so much code written in something else where I wouldn't have all these kind of guarantees and the simplicity that Go offers me. Like I feel like it's that kind of the ability to maintain so much Go codes that is enabled by like Go itself.
Yeah.
I couldn't have done it otherwise.
yeah.
Amen.
I think lines of code in Go is misleading because I think Go is very what do I want to say? Dense, vertically dense is what I want to say. But if you read 10 lines of code in Go, there's very little there. It's just that there's a lot that's happening on a vertical space, but there is not a lot that's happening in that vertical space. So 100 lines of Go compared to 100 lines of another language, there's a lot less happening in that 100 lines of code in Go.
Yeah.
But maybe we're achieving more. I'm not sure, but there's definitely a lot less because there's more going on vertically.
No, and that makes it easier to read.
Yeah, you can see
Yes.
everything that happens. Like it's all
Yes.
right in the code in front of you. There's no necessity to like jump into maybe there's a macro defined or something else. You don't have to jump, or maybe an operator has been overloaded. None of that. You just know that it's exactly what you see.
Yes. And you are a maintainer for the Go language, right?
So I'm let's see, what's the right word for it? I'm a contributor, I believe. So I contributed to the project. I do have like the, I think reviewer maybe bit. So I can review code that goes in. But of course, they have it so that there's always like a package owner. So that person has to make the final call if a change that goes into a certain package goes in or not.
So we're probably running short on time a little bit. Do we want to jump into kind of projects and news? I know there's one particular news item that we need to make sure we cover.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we should start off with the most important thing, which is there is security releases Go 1.9.1 and 1.8.4. If you are running 1.9 or 1.8, please update. I think it was like two different security issues those solved for.
Yeah, one of them was NetSMTP, and the other was a nested Git vulnerability. If you tried to check out a Go package into another Git repository, you could cause a code execution exploit.
Yeah, so don't go get packages you don't trust until that update.
Yeah.
And probably not after either.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't trust those anyway. Almost every language has that because there's execution that takes place, right? Like if you go install something, like you don't have control over
Actually,
that.
Go I think is better in a sense because when you go get something, it does the download, the checkout, and then also maybe it builds it, but it doesn't actually run any of that code until you go test it, for example.
Yeah, but you could have like generators and things like that with build hooks
Right.
so that
So
it
unless
can
you
tell.
go generate, you wouldn't be executing any of their code.
I guess that's true too.
So like this bug was really the only way to have somebody where you could go get and be compromised. As far as I know, there's no other way to do it.
All right, so interesting projects.
So Skylark was released this week, and that looks interesting because it's a light version of Python, but it's written in Go, and it looks like it's going to be used for Bazel, which is Google's build tool, to replace the original version of that scripting tool. Now I don't remember what the Python version is called, but it looks like a really interesting project because it's embeddable in Go. So it could be used nicely for building DSLs, for building configuration languages, etc. The original Python version was also called Skylark.
Hmm. There was a new Lua interpreter too that came out in Go.
There was.
Um, I have to pull up the link. I'll make sure it's in the show notes. But
Yep.
there was a couple a few years ago that I remember using. Um, but yeah, I had seen something come out where there's a new one.
So this one, I think it's targeting Lua 5.3, which is one of the more recent versions. And I think the previous ones maybe didn't do that. So like that's the exciting part because most people actually want to use the later version.
Nobody wants to use old languages.
Well, they apparently changed a lot between the point releases. So like it's more like almost like a new major version actually.
Yeah, I actually haven't kept up with Lua too much. It's interesting because like earlier in my career, I used a lot of Lua, and now not so much.
So the question for you is, why did you? Oh, somebody already posted the link in our Slack. These guys are on it.
Oh, yeah, I was just pulling up the link
Damn.
too.
So why did you use a lot of Lua though? What was the thing? What was the problem you were solving with Lua? For me, it was scripting inside Nginx with something like OpenResty.
Yeah, so there's that, but then there's also things where like you might have in your application where you have some sort of like DSL you need to create, um, like rules engines or something like that, and maybe you don't want to have to build your own things. You just kind of support Lua. So and I know like video games use it too.
Yep, that's where I've seen it used most. But that was a while ago, but it was one of the best use cases for it, just scripting everywhere.
It's just super fast to embed in something and give somebody, close to um, a real language to work with.
Yep.
And there's pretty easy ways to sandbox it where the code they execute doesn't really have access to like the full implementation.
I would love to see some code examples of a Go application that embeds a Lua scripting language to do stuff. So that's my open challenge to you internets. Send me an example of that. I want to see it.
Now I'm gonna have to come up with something.
Well, you don't have
I'll think of
you don't have to
something.
make up one. I just want to see a real life application.
Oh,
Not
okay.
a fake one, Eric. A real one.
If they exist.
All right. So another cool tool that I saw come out, I'm guessing the name is called Collie, the dog. It's github.com/ASCII/COLLY. And it's like a web scraping utility written in Go. And you can kind of visit links and things like that. Um, so that looks really cool because a lot of people have been using like Python for this. There's like some good tools like called Scapy or Scrapey or something like that is the tool that's used. There's another one that's really common for doing web scraping in Python too. So I wonder whether we're gonna get like some like capybaras and things like that built on top of this.
That'd be cool.
So aside from that, I and in full disclosure, I have not watched this full video yet. I've been traveling a bunch. But Tyler Treat did a talk at Strange Loop titled "So You Want to Go Fast," and that was actually pretty interesting, getting into kind of tail latency and things of that nature. We will drop a link to that video in the show notes. That's worth a watch, at least to the point that I've watched it so far.
Yeah, I'm the same. I watched some of it, and it looked really good. Have not,
Definitely gonna watch it.
have not
He's
watched
he's
all of
super
it.
smart, so I assume the rest of it is also good.
Yeah, based on his historical blog posts and other talks, it's probably guaranteed to be a great presentation. So you won't do yourself any harm by watching it.
Too much travel. And see, I just want to drop the link in the channel, and Florin's already on it.
Yeah,
What does everybody even need us for anymore?
frickin' Florin.
All right. So let's roll into Free Software Friday. Does anybody have anybody they want to give shout outs to this week?
I do.
All right, let's hear it.
So I decided I was going to finally learn Tmux. And I've been resisting Tmux forever because it just annoys me that there's one more layer of things on top of the things that I already have to remember in Vim. So I've been avoiding it. But I found, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. I'll spell it BYOBU by Dustin Kirkland. And it's a pretty wrapper on top of either Tmux or Screen. And it's pretty nice, just a handful of keyboard commands that you really need to remember as opposed to the billion crazy Tmux combinations. So I'm all about that.
Let us know how that went.
What's that?
Let us know how it went.
I will.
I want to give a shout out to Go examples. How do I say this in the right way? The ability to write examples in Go. That is
yeah, as part of the documentation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah, the Guild doc
you can write
feature.
tests and you can write examples, which actually I only found out a couple months ago. And it makes me so warm and fuzzy inside. It's one of those things. I'm in absolute love with it. And today I got to write my first one, and I think I'm going to be obsessed about it.
Nice.
That is
Oh my
awesome.
gosh.
It's a great feature.
I absolutely love them because they ensure that it always runs,
Mhm.
right? Like,
And it runs. I love that. I love it.
And they're tests. That's the best part. They're tests. So if your examples don't pass, your tests don't pass.
Yep.
and you end up
Yeah.
basically breaking the build if you break the API. Your examples don't match anymore.
Yep.
And it's so helpful for people who don't know your code base. This like you can populate a type and run, and the output is right there. You don't even need to run. It's just right there on the file. So cool.
We should look up who implemented that just so we can give them a huge shout out.
Yes, whoever you are, you're
Props.
amazing. Thank you.
Odds are pretty good it was Brad. All the outside the box stuff in the Go team comes from Brad, let's be honest. You can quote me in that on Twitter. Go ahead. It's okay. He's on parental leave right now.
Yeah, you can tell he's missing. It's kind of he's not around.
It's so quiet.
Well, I can tell at least.
He was the one that pushed for the patch release for the security update. That probably wasn't going to happen if he hadn't pushed it too hard. So even on paternity leave, even with a newborn, Brad's taking care of business. Shout out to Brad.
Yep.
Shout out to Baby. We like baby gophers.
Always.
And he's growing up surrounded by tons and tons of gophers.
It's kind of awesome.
Yeah, my household has so many gopher things in it. It's not even funny. People have to think we're like the oddest family ever.
Well, now I feel pretty good because I've got a bunch of them too.
Like, what is their obsession with cartoon gophers? I don't get it.
I've got a project in mind.
Awesome.
So this is Gopher CI by Bradley Falzon. So he made this kind of continuous code quality CI system of sorts, and it's specifically for Go. So able to run a bunch of the static code analysis Go tools like static check, Go vet, Go simple. all the ones that are made by the community, and of course the official ones. And the idea is that it's very, very simple to use. So it's easier to use than Travis CI, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically enable it for your GitHub username, and then all your Go projects will start to benefit from it. So when you push a pull request or somebody else makes one, if there are any issues found by those tools, it will kind of leave a comment and let you know. So Bradley Falzon worked on creating this, and he's developing it further, and it's just a really awesome Go project. So I'm really glad that it exists, and thanks to him for making it.
Yeah, it's crazy cheap, and we got to give a shout out to all the Gophers down under. So
Yep.
down where the toilets flush in the other direction. Thanks, Bradley.
And I'm also a huge fan of the fact that he made the project open source. So even though, basically the way it works is if you want to run it yourself, you can just do that. It's open source, download the codes, put it on your server and run it. But if you want the convenience of having a hosted version run your codes, you pay the $4 a month for the personal version or something like that. And then you don't have to do it yourself. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's evolved quite a bit. And we actually have him on the list of people we're going to try to tap to get on the show too.
Very cool.
Nice.
To talk about it. So.
Yeah, so I watched the repository where he develops the new features, and it's just really cool to see the things that are happening. And he makes all the codes really high quality before merging it. So it's great to be able to see that.
So for mine, I don't have anything new that people haven't heard of before, but it's new to me. So I'm gonna give a shout out to VS Code and Ramya and all the people who contribute to the Go plugin.
Awesome.
Because I promised her when we had her on the show just before GopherCon that I would give VS Code a solid go, because I've been a Vim user for so long, and past couple weeks I've been using that kind of exclusively for both kind of blogging and writing code, and it's pretty sweet. I'm undecided if I'll stay because I have withdrawals from Vim, but if I left Vim for anything, it would probably be VS Code. So did anybody have any more shout outs, or do we want to wrap this thing up?
I think we're done.
I can do one more quick one.
Yeah.
So this is more for a open source contributor. So this will be to Glenn Lewis. So he helps a lot with the Go GitHub Go package. It's the Go client for GitHub's API. And he basically makes sure that the PRs get reviewed and merged. And without him, I'm not sure what that project would do. So huge thanks for all his work. That's Glenn Lewis.
Awesome.
So Dmitri, just please add a link to
Oh
that
yeah, good
first.
idea.
Thanks.
And we'll make sure to get all this stuff in that we mentioned into the show notes. So I think with that, we're probably about out of time. So we're gonna wrap the official show up, and then as always, we might hang out and take some questions from the live listeners. So if you happen to be around at 3 p.m. on Thursdays Eastern time, and you join us in the Slack channel, get to kind of interact with us before and after the show. So with that, thanks everybody for being on the show. Huge thank you to Dmitri for coming on and bearing with us through all of the delays and rescheduling and reworking the way we record episodes temporarily.
Hey, I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming, Dmitri.
So you can find us on Twitter at GoTimeFM or GoTime.fm online. If you want to be on the show or have suggestions for guests or topics, the best way to do that is file an issue on our GitHub repo, which is github.com/GoTimeFM/ping. And with that, bye everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. This was a great show.
Bye.
All right, that's it for this episode of Go Time. Tune in live on Thursdays at 3 p.m. U.S. Eastern at changelog.com/live. Join the community and Slack with us in real time during the shows. Head to changelog.com/community. Follow us on Twitter. We're at GoTimeFM. Special thanks to Fastly, our bandwidth partner. Head to fastly.com to learn more. Also, Linode. We host everything we do on Linode servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. Go Time is edited by Jonathan Youngblood, and the theme music for Go Time is produced by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. We'll see you again next week. Thanks for listening.